Thank you, everyone. Super excited to be here. I'm Arpit, Senior Product Manager at LinkedIn. So last year, we launched this product called Smart Replies in LinkedIn messaging. These are machine learning-based contextual reply suggestions. There have been some really valuable lessons that we've learned from that, and that's why I wanted to talk about those learnings and how you could generally use them when you're building products using machine learning. But before that, I wanted to start with my journey of becoming a product manager. So I was born in India, and then I was good in academics, and typically how it works in India, if you're good in academics, you end up becoming an engineer, and that's what I did. So, but while I was in engineering, I realized one thing, that I was really interested in design, human-centered design, UI design. These terms were really interesting to me, and my engineering school was very close to a leading design school in India. And we used to get like a lot of professors from there, and that really got me interested in design. And it got me so interested in design that by the time I graduated, I didn't take a job as a software engineer, but I landed as a job as a UX designer at one of large Indian technology services company. And I think like some of that early experience really helped shape my thinking while building products, because now as a product manager, I'm like more focused on design, or when I'm working with designers, I can bring like some of that knowledge and experience with that. After this, there's one thing that I felt was missing was like business knowledge. I wanted to figure out how does the business work? What are some of the things that are important, some of the things that are not important? So I ended up joining business school, and this was in 2007. So when you enter a business school, you're also thinking about your future, some of the companies that you're going to work at, salaries and all that stuff. But then this happened, the financial crash of 2008, and all our dreams also started crashing. It was really hard to get, like some of the jobs that you were thinking or aspiring towards, which led to, me working in a lot of Indian tech startups, in smaller companies, and maybe a series of unfulfilling jobs, and in a variety of roles like business development, sales, marketing, something maybe I wasn't too passionate about, but I was doing. But one good thing that came out of here, I was talking to a lot of people about my next move, next play, what should I be doing. And a lot of people told me that you should try this field called product management. These are the people who are really, like the center of the business. They're taking a lot of these design decisions. They're taking a lot of these business decisions. You should try becoming a product manager. So I started applying to different startups who would be willing to take a product manager who doesn't have any experience. And I landed my first PM gig with this company called SlideShare, an online platform to upload content. Actually, by the time they gave me an offer, literally, like the next day, I heard the news that they were acquired by LinkedIn. So I ended up joining LinkedIn India. So this was back in 2012 in India. So I joined LinkedIn India, but was working on SlideShare. And SlideShare was this unique product where the founders were based in Bay Area, but all the engineering, product, design was happening in India. So as you can imagine, a lot of late night calls, early morning calls with founders. So did a lot of that. And then eventually in 2015, I moved to the US. Continued working on SlideShare, and then had this desire to work on core LinkedIn products. So moved to this team called Sharing, which is like sharing of content into our feed, like where you share on Facebook, images, text links, articles. And then more recently, for last year or so, I've been working on LinkedIn messaging. So I've been building consumer products for LinkedIn for about 5 years now. All right, so I spoke about smart replies. Let me show you this video, and then I can talk a little bit more so that you guys have context. So as you can see from this video, these are reply suggestions which are contextual and relevant to your conversations. The algorithms that power them are based using machine learning, and they are now an extremely important part of the LinkedIn messaging ecosystem. 1/10 of all messages are sent using smart replies. So, which, like, it's pretty big, and we've benchmarked against Google's smart replies that they have in Gmail and other products of theirs, and we hear similar numbers where 10 to 15% of all responses, even on their products, are using these smart replies. And this has fundamentally shaped shaped our thinking around how we build products now. So anything that we are doing, we're thinking, how can we make it more smart, more intelligent? How can we link it to smart replies? I'll give you another example. Like when we think of building GIFs in messaging or having voice messages, we're constantly thinking, like, if I send a GIF like happy birthday, can we tie it back to smart replies so that the receiver gets thank you as a smart reply text to those happy birthday GIFs? So it's like literally like fundamentally changed how messaging works. So this topic, like about how we build this, what are the machine learning models, or what are the learnings. So before getting into that, I wanted to give some basic overview about machine learning. And it's an everyday phenomenon, as you guys would have noticed. You're taking a picture on Facebook, you see these photo tagging, or you're on Netflix, YouTube, you see these recommendations that are served for you, or your anti-spam filters in your email clients like Gmail, Outlook, other clients. And like, the idea is simple, that essentially we should give machine access to data and let them figure out. But there have been a couple of things that have really accelerated the development of machine learning over the last few years. First major breakthrough was in 1959, where Arthur Samuel coined the term machine learning. His definition was field of study that gives computer the ability to learn without being explicitly programmed. He developed a checkers game and programmed the game to play the game like tens of thousands of times, so that the game could learn what are the good board positions and bad board positions. This was first breakthrough, and the second breakthrough has happened like in early 90s and 2000s with the emergence of internet. Now there is so much of data being generated, being stored, being available to analyze. So this entire field is starting to boom, because then you could build those interesting use cases that I just showed with like photo tagging and recommendations, anti-spam, and other things. Without going too much into details, I'll just talk about like two broad types of learning models that are prevalent. One is supervised learning, and the idea is simple. When you're training the model, you give them data where both the input and output is given to the machine. A good example of this is, for example, a credit card fraud detection. You have historical data of which transactions go through and which transactions are fraudulent. You give machine that data, and it starts to learn that, okay, these type of transactions should not be flagged, and these type of transactions can be flagged as possible fraudulent. And the other broad category of learning is unsupervised learning, where the algorithm looks for structure in the training data. A good example of this is Google News. So for example, there is this news about the new Galaxy S9 and comparison to iPhone 10. So what Google would do is they're going through the web and they're starting to cluster all those news articles from different sources like The Verge and USA Today and all those other news sources, which are about this particular topic. So they're like very good applications of these things. So I'm no expert in machine learning, so I would just leave you with these basics. And machine learning is like a vast field, and there's a lot of resources. I've added some resources at the end of my presentation. So I'll bring the focus back to smart replies, how we build this, what are the learnings that we have generated that you could use in the products that you are building. So this is the process of how we ended up building smart replies in LinkedIn messaging. We created these set of responses, a finite set of responses called candidate replies. So these are replies that we could eventually suggest to our users, like, thank you, sounds good, see you soon, goodbye. To create these candidate replies, we processed messages, millions of messages that are happening on LinkedIn. We removed any possible identifiers using which, in future someone could figure out that person A actually sent that message. So we removed names, email addresses, their phone numbers, credit card information, any details of who the member is. We looked at messages that were sent by a large number of users. So we didn't want, I could be saying something very contextual to my manager, say on LinkedIn messaging. We don't want to suggest that as a response. So we created these candidate replies. We then created training data. So we had access to these millions of messages that are happening daily on LinkedIn. So we started automatically scanning them and created this training data, which is examples of what is the conversation and what is the message and what is the reply. Basically, these candidate replies, what is this pair of a message and a candidate reply. That became our training data or training examples. And that went to our machine learning model. So at LinkedIn, we have our own machine learning framework called DAGLI. So we use DAGLI to create our machine learning model, which essentially gives probability of a particular message that comes in. It looks at the training data and tells that a likely answer is one of these candidate replies. So using that, we had now a list of candidate replies or reply suggestions for each of those messages. So this is in a nutshell how we built smart replies. I'm describing this process because that helps set the context for some of the learnings that we've generated. So first learning, validate your hypothesis before you invest in machine learning. So there is a lot of hype around machine learning. It's a machine learning, AI, it's a buzzword. But you need to figure out, do you actually need machine learning? Is it truly going to solve the problem that you're trying to solve in a meaningful way? How we ended up doing this for smart replies is, to begin with, we had these static reply suggestions called quick replies. For every single message, we had the same replies. So you can, start to think that this is pretty annoying, that any message that I'm sending, LinkedIn is just suggesting me these replies. They're not smart at all. But the entire idea was, is this going to be useful to members or not? The problem that we were trying to solve here is, on LinkedIn messaging, you would send a response and a large portion of our users wouldn't see or wouldn't get a response in a reasonable time frame. I would send a message and I would get a response back next day, 2 days back. When you're talking or building a real-time messaging system, you don't want that. It's not an email-based system. So we thought okay, professionals are busy people. Can we provide them with some buttons, some suggestions so that they can help close the conversation soon or continue the conversations in a faster way? So before even investing in machine learning or even talking about it, we came up with this idea and notion of, okay, let's do these quick replies, these reply suggestions. Internally, we got a lot of feedback that, hey, this is not smart. What would users think? They would think that LinkedIn is dumb. But we were just trying to validate our hypothesis. We in fact had business rules, if someone sent a sticker, have these quick replies. If someone sent an attachment, have these quick replies. We saw massive lift in our key engagement metrics in terms of messages sent, unique users sending messages, response times, which just validated our hypothesis that this thing has value. This thing has legs. We need to invest more in that. If we add intelligence to this thing and get rid of all these business rules, we could create a very powerful experience for our members. The point that I'm trying to drive home is again, like start with something basic, start with something simple before jumping into machine learning. I'll give you another example. This is from Gmail. There are products that may feel smart or personal, but they're not built using machine learning. Sometimes heuristics, business rules are enough. So for example, when you send an email using Gmail, you'll say, please find attached, and a pop-up will come up that it seems like you didn't attach anything. Like if you actually had a machine learning algorithm, there are chances that it might catch more things, but it might fail also a lot of times. I could be saying completely different, and it might just pop up a message that, hey, did you forget to attach your attachment? So just see, if you really need machine learning to be able to solve something in a meaningful way. Second, learning. So even though, you have all this data, you have access to all this data, but a lot of times that data is not clean. And we found that out with messaging, because people, when they're talking in messaging, someone, maybe their grammar is not right, they're using some offensive messages, it's not clean, and we can't end up cleaning like millions of messages to have for the training set. So one thing we've realized, to avoid embarrassing mistakes, you need insightful human intervention. And we learned this lesson by making an embarrassing mistake. So during our initial testing, when this product was ramped to team, this was one of the reply suggestions that came up to me, thanks Dad. So again, it's something that, like LinkedIn would not recommend to our members. And so we didn't want these kind of things. And so this was a very early realization as we had the product ramped to internal team members, that unless we have insightful human intervention, this product is not going to work. So we created something like this. Like we had our finite candidate replies. We literally had like team go through each of those replies and say that, okay, these are offensive, let's discard them. These require more professional version of it, because LinkedIn is a professional network. Like for example, there could be things like, hey bro. It may be okay in different messaging platforms, but not on LinkedIn. So we made a professional version of that, or we dropped, like any gender references. So this thing we did internally within the Smart Replies team. We started doing that. But there was another thing that we realized. So we had, because it was like a large data set, we had assigned it to different people. Different people had different styles, which was becoming challenging, because when a member sees the product, they don't care who did those 10 different rows, right? Like they are looking at the product in a very holistic way. So we had to literally like go back and like one person had to redo all these things to ensure consistency. Another problem that we started figuring out, like English is okay. Most of the team members were speaking English, but when you go to other languages like Spanish, French, and other languages, it was becoming harder and harder to do this consistently, because we didn't have those skill sets in the team. So we did have a training data set, but that data set was literally like in millions. So it's something that we couldn't like humanly, like go and clean up. So like the things that I was saying is, the different languages that they come with their own set of rules. And we were doing this internally within our team, and we quickly realized this is not going to scale. So we hired linguists as contractors. We hired them, who obviously have a better sense in terms of consistency, better usage of language, better realization of what works across the entire LinkedIn product, what tone works, what professionalism works. So my key takeaway from this is that you would need, don't bank on your training data alone, because that training data may have like issues like we had in our training data. When you are launching that product, you still need a human intervention to make sure that the experience that you're delivering to your members is top notch.
Question? Do you remember how many you had? How many possible replies?
It's in thousands.
Thousands?
Yeah. So My third learning while building this product has been you can build the best machine learning model, but as a product manager, that's not my goal. My goal is to create the delightful experience that I want to deliver. So, as I said, like we had these for each message, we had a probable reply suggestions for each particular message. We could show a lot of reply suggestions, but how we tackle this problem to make the right user experience. So we had reply suggestions that didn't seem like canned responses. So this was very important. In other parts of LinkedIn product, we have this issue where we have long sentences that we recommend to users. Like for example, if I said, "Hey, how are you? Do you want to catch up today?" Now, if multiple people are sending you the same message, you would quickly realize that, hey, you didn't type this. LinkedIn recommended this, or these are canned responses, and that starts creating a bad experience. But when you look at some of these responses, like "What about you? Haha, sounds good," this is something like you could have typed. So this was very important to us, that we kept short responses and responses that looked like that they won't appear as canned when someone is sending them. Another thing that we did, as I said, we had more reply suggestions that we could serve, but we ensured speed by limiting the number of reply suggestions that we would surface to users. At any given time, we would surface not more than 3 reply suggestions, just to make sure that users could quickly choose one of them and then just select them. There were initial proposals that, hey, our model is spitting out like 10 responses. Why don't we have like a UI element? You click on that and you see like those 10 responses. It's going to be so easy. Let's give users that choice. But this is a product point of view that I took and the team took, is if we provide that, then it's no longer like those quick or smart replies, because then it's more work. I'd rather like just type out my response. So let's limit these number of suggestions. In fact, there are times when our model is not confident. We would show fewer responses. We would show 2 responses. We would show 1 response, and at times we would show no responses, because we believe like that's creating the right experience. Instead of like just showing a particular response to game our metrics, get more messages, we in fact reverted to this particular approach. There is another interesting thing that we did. In the second example, you see Sure Harini, that's the name of the person that sent me a message. We started doing personalization. So if Harini sent me that message, instead of just recommending Sure, we had like that LinkedIn profile information, and we start injecting it smartly so that this looks like, again, like goes back to my earlier thing, like it doesn't look like a canned response. I could actually be saying that, because if someone sends me that message. Another key learning has been that your machine learning model will get output wrong. So how do you give that signal back to your machine learning model? And that's where user feedback comes into play, where users can tell us, hey, this is not relevant, and they tell that, and then that goes as a signal, as a negative signal to the model, and then the model can learn and spit out better responses next time. So I'll actually use Facebook's example here, because we've been, even though I'm sharing this learning, we've been guilty of not building user feedback till now. It's in progress, coming soon. But the idea here is, if you look at these reply suggestions, like they give you options for each reply, like the suggestion isn't helpful, or you could dismiss the entire row of suggestions. So it starts giving signals back to the model that this is not useful. We need to change that. So this is super useful, and again, like this is something that we are lacking in our product, and we are building that.
Question?
Yeah.
Is there an implicit kind of suggestion was not helpful by not using it? And how do you segment that data?
Sure. So so the question is, like, is there an implicit assumption that if a user doesn't use smart replies, is it useful or not? So that's definitely a signal, and we use that right now. But a more explicit signal is, this particular smart reply may be completely irrelevant, right? Like in the example that I showed you, thanks dad, you could ignore it, but that's wrong. Like we should literally be not showing like those kind of replies. Like it could be completely inappropriate. And another thing that we've noticed is sometimes the reply suggestions may be useful, but I want to type out something long. I want to type out something more thoughtful. So it's hard to take that as face value. So at LinkedIn, and I'm sure at like all the companies that you work at or any products that you build, user privacy is super, super, super important. Users are using our products because they trust us. So even though we have access to these millions and millions of messages that users are messaging, but we didn't simply like end up using them in like in a very raw format, because one of the big risks that is there, that hey, what if like if some, like a human, an engineer or someone is reading those messages, what are the implications of that on the product? And that was just not done. That was like a non-starter for us. So we in fact made series of transformations to those raw messages, so that they didn't contain any private information or any identifier, so that we could, or any human could, literally identify that from whom this message is coming. That's been really important for us, again because of user trust. We don't want a situation where some user comes and says that, or like an engineer does something bad, looks at a particular message and says, like, oh, I read someone's particular message, and there are like legal implications, there are trust implications. So what we ended up doing is we removed all member names and we replaced them with thanks recipient. And this eventually helped us to personalize our reply suggestions. Like the examples that I was showing you, you could get a reply suggestion which is thanks Arpit. That's largely because we removed and replaced them with placeholders. We removed proper nouns, we removed email addresses, we removed phone numbers, URLs, or even numbers, because what if I was sharing like credit card information or anything that's like numbers or digit basis. So again, whenever you're thinking of machine learning, always think about the privacy and the trust aspect of your users, because you could build like my engineering team initially was like, we need access to those raw messages, because how else do we debug? It becomes really hard. But this was like literally a hard constraint that we put, that we'll not even start building this product if there is access to those raw messages. So super important you do that. Another thing that's important that you should be focusing on is, even after taking all those precautions, even after like securing that you are doing the best to protect users' privacy and trust, you need to let members opt out of a particular feature. They may not like it. They may be that, oh, LinkedIn is being like a big brother, we don't want this. So again, like even when we were launching this product, we were like, we cannot go out if we don't have a setting which lets members opt out of this thing. So super important that you build a setting like like as relevant, that respects users' privacy. So this is a quick recap of some of the things that I covered. First is validate your hypothesis. Don't jump into machine learning just because it's the next big thing or is a big thing. Build with purpose. So to avoid embarrassing mistakes, you need human intervention. Your training data is not always going to be clean. There are going to be issues with that. So you need human intervention before you start making that product public. It's not about the machine learning model. It's about creating that right user experience. It's about creating that delightful experience. It's about creating those meaningful interactions that the problem that you were trying to solve. Provide mechanisms for user feedback. Actually, I covered negative signal. Another thing that it does is it gives team that feedback, or it lets users give that feedback that this product is working or not working. So it's a very clear indication that this is working or not. And fifth is respect users' privacy. I cannot stress enough on this point. And at times, just because we want to build the best machine learning model, there is this tendency to forget about that. But this is the thing that really keeps us on track and helps build that trust in the product. I really liked this comic strip because I feel like machine learning is like really powerful, and you could end up building a lot of products that may start freaking out people. But that's the value of this tool, that it's a powerful tool. Use it wisely to create those delightful products. For us, because of all these learnings and everything, we've been able to build smart replies into something that's used now by millions of users. It's a huge part of the messaging ecosystem. So I would urge you to use these learnings more generally, more broadly, to address and create those delightful products that you want to create. Yeah, that's it for me. So the question is, what was the thought behind building this smart replies? Because LinkedIn is not a real-time platform. That's the question, right? Okay. So LinkedIn has, I think, there has been this notion on LinkedIn that it's a place where you go update your profile once every 6 months, or when you're looking for a job, you go there. But that is not defensible. So one of the things that we are actively trying to do is push this idea of building active communities on LinkedIn. So you would start seeing that across all our products. When you see feed, we want people to come, make it a regular habit. You're coming on a daily basis, you're consuming content, you're consuming news. When it's messaging, we want people to interact with each other, and to make it real time. If I send you a message, I expect a response in a reasonable amount of time, not like 7 days later. So I think there is this general focus and trend at LinkedIn where we want to make things more real time, get this feeling of community, that there are things happening on this. Another messaging feature that we recently launched in the same vein is active status. You would start seeing these green dots on profiles now all over LinkedIn, which says that you're online. Again, the idea is, if I'm online, you can talk to me right now. That could be in feed, in messaging, in any possible way. But that's the idea of making LinkedIn more real time. One of the things, like a year and a half back, we were struggling was driving response rates in messaging. It literally felt to a lot of members that they were speaking in an empty room. They would send out a message and nothing would happen. One of the insights that we were working with is professionals are busy people. Like, I could see a message, but I don't always have the time to respond. So can we provide users with some quick options so that they're on the go, they can just tap something and then that response is sent. So that was the idea, and that's where we started with those the quick replies that I mentioned initially. Can we have some buttons, like a thumbs up button? Let's see what happens. So it's been this product has evolved since then. So the question is, what is the marginal benefit between hard-coded quick replies and smart replies? So in terms of, I'll talk first about metrics. So in terms of metrics, we've seen quick replies and over smart replies literally like a massive improvement or in our key messaging metrics. So that's a win for us. Other than that, I think there is a user expectation also that if LinkedIn is providing these reply suggestions, why are they not contextual? They seem like dumb suggestions. LinkedIn should be doing better. It's 2018. It's like that kind of perception. And another advantage that it gives us, it goes back to that real-time point. So with those quick replies, it was hard to insert those quick replies in a real-time context. So we would just show them once you enter the conversation. But with these smart replies, we could show them all the time because they were changing as the message was coming in. So the question is, was I working on machine learning products earlier? And if not, how did I work with engineering teams and learned about machine learning? So the answer is this was my first machine learning based product. And to be very honest, when we started thinking of like, let's do this, I was very skeptical or nervous. I remember I was talking to my manager that I don't know if I'll be able to do this. I don't have any experience in this. He's like, a good test would be like 6 months, a year later, you could be giving a talk about smart replies. So I can go back to my manager, like mission accomplished. But I think it was a steep learning curve. So I started like literally going through, like LinkedIn learning courses, Coursera courses, just trying to ground myself in what exactly is this machine learning thing. Another thing that at LinkedIn, we are fortunate enough to have like a large relevance team, which have these experts. I literally started setting up one-on-ones with them, coffee chats with them, just to understand what this entire thing is all about. What's the best way to get me started? Another thing, when we were building this product, I made sure to be part of every single meeting, every stand-up, even though at times I would not understand or follow it. Like after those stand-ups, I would go and like ping them, then can you explain this to me in like plain English? So I think you need to have a very open attitude that this is something that I don't know, but I'm willing to learn. And if you are showing, like signs that I'll be like, hey, I just read this on the internet, like, can you explain this more to me? People are generally very open about doing this. So the question is, are the actual replies created by human or generated by machines, right? The library. By the library. So these reply suggestions are generated by the library, but these are cleaned by humans. So to give you an example, like the library would suggest, thank you, dude. Right? Now that is something that we as LinkedIn brand, we don't want to suggest dude as a word. So we would drop that. Like that's a human going and saying that thank you, dude is not relevant. I wouldn't say relevant, is not a professional version. We should recommend thank you in whenever the system predicts thank you, dude. So what we did was we first machines processed messages. They figured out like these are the messages that are used by like thousands of people on LinkedIn, right? It could be like, let's say thank you, dude. Let's stick with that example. So a lot of members are using that. So that became our candidate reply set. Now what we did as humans, we started manually vetting all those thousands of replies and said that thank you, dude is not a right response. It should be thank you. And then when the model was essentially predicting thank you, dude, but in the product, we didn't show thank you, dude, we showed thank you. Okay. So the question is, what this thanks dad was tested with users. No, this was an internal release. So this was before any human intervention. We were confident, we have a machine learning model, it'll work. So this was during an internal release, internal testing that we realized that this is the problem. So we never tested this. And then we as a product team, we had a point of view that there needs to be a certain type of tone in the reply suggestions that we give. So that's the point of view that we took. So at LinkedIn, typically, where we are launching products, we first do like internal team ramp, like the Smart Replies team ramp is playing with this. Then we go broader, we launch to entire company, because at that point in time, we feel that, okay, we're confident, but there's still some bugs, but it's okay. And once we polish off that experience, get feedback, then we start doing incremental ramps, like we'll ramp to 1% of US, 5%, 50%. So we do incremental rollouts. Each rollout gives us more confidence that we've resolved bugs, we are addressing user feedback. So like when we go 50% or 100%, we are way more confident in the product than these internal releases. Good. Sure. So the question is about, is there a standard process to launching products? Is that? So I'll talk about launching. So generally there is no like a standardized that you need to do step 1, step 2, step 3, but there's generally a checklist of things that we are expected to do, and that's built on like years of like releasing small and big product features. So now we have a very comprehensive checklist that, like where I said, like it should be an internal team RAM first, company RAM, this and that. It should get sign off from legal, it should get sign off from design. So all those checklists are now in place. We don't have a standard procedure that, or like a waterfall method that step 1, step 2, step 3, but we know like these are the 10 things or 15 things that we need to do before we launch something. Does that answer your question? Sure. So the question is about ideation, how we ideate. So there are, I would say, like 3 or 4 key areas where we would ideate. One is looking at data. So obviously, you know, like entire teams, engineering, biz ops, different functions, they have access to data. So we're constantly looking at ways that, oh, can we improve this part of the funnel? Is there a way to optimize that? Secondly, we do a lot of user testing. We call users in our research labs. We talk to them. We do phone calls with them. There are a lot of ways where we are collecting. People will write to us. They'll complain to us. So there are a lot of ways where they're reaching out to us, saying that they want a particular feature. So that also becomes like a data point into, you know, like our ideation. And third is, you know, we're constantly looking at what our competitors are doing, just to be aware that, you know, like this is something that other users are using. This is gaining traction on other platforms. It's not to say that, you know, you're in a constant race to copy each other's features, but it becomes a data point. Is that useful? Would a feature like that be useful on LinkedIn? And I think a combination of these 3 data points plus intuition like largely becomes like our product backlog. Once we have the product backlog, we have our regular quarterly plannings. So where the team would get together and say that, hey, these are the 10 ideas that are worth pursuing. Then we go talk to our business operations team. They help size us those particular initiatives. And then out of those 10, we would like cut them down to like 3 or 5 things that we'll actually be doing in a quarter based on the impact that it'll have. And sometimes it's based on metrics. Sometimes it's based on like an emotional need that, oh, our users have been asking for this functionality for a year now. You know, it will not have any metrics impact, but it solves an emotional need. So it's a combination of those things that gets into like our quarterly planning.
What are some techniques you use to combat any biases in the data itself? So like, for example, in candidate search, maybe Johns have really good like hit rate with recruiters. Like, that makes it so that other people aren't showing up naturally. What are some interventions you can do?
So I think one of the advantages, you know, like of our data is because we have like recruiters talking to candidates, we have members talking to each other, we have some cold calls happening. It just became like a varied data set by in itself. Like, so we were fortunate enough that there was less bias. So there have been talks about like, can we develop a model for a particular type of message? I think that's where the larger problem would be of a bias. We didn't end up facing that because of our diverse data set. So it becomes scalable because we're restricting the output to a finite response set. So that's been a key in, you know, like this product, because there's another approach that we could have taken is like generating free-form responses and not restricting our replies to like a finite response set, because then we run the risk of like model going rogue, you know, like so we've not taken that approach. What, you know, like getting new data and putting it back in the system, it does is it just creates more data for the machine learning model to be more accurate. So the probability of reply suggestions increases. Yeah, so we are actually in the process of doing an international rollout right now. So right now we have these linguists who are annotating our responses, like the Excel sheet that I was showing you guys. So right now our product is live in English. So next we are looking at Spanish. And you know, like other languages. So some of the things that we are starting to notice, or people are coming back and saying that like in English, it's okay to say hi Arpit, but in certain other languages or certain other cultures, they would do hi Mr. Arpit. You know, like, so those kind of things we as a product team sitting in the US, we have no idea. So that's why, you know, you need those experts who are like helping us out, that like this culture or this language needs different treatment than your standard product. So we've used a lot of A/B testing here. So first A/B test that we ran was comparing quick replies, those standard replies, with this product. So that was the first first A/B test that we ran. Second interesting thing that we've been running is, so a lot of times those reply suggestions that were generated were thanks, thank you so much. Now, from a user perspective, you know, like they're all the same thing. So we started adding more diversity into those responses, saying that these particular responses belong to one set. They are the thank you set. So let's just launch, let's not have more than one or maybe two responses from the same set. So that introduces diversity in responses. We tested that with the current model. You know, so we've been like running a lot of these tests running a lot of these A/B tests against the current models, just to see what performs better. If it meets our benchmarks, then we roll out the new one. Yeah, so I think I have focused a lot initially on what is the experience that we want to create and why it is important. Like, I was literally trying to set the vision for the team. That was my first job. Second job was I relied heavily. So the model that we took, we within messaging team, we did not have any relevance or machine learning expertise. So there is a separate group relevance team. We borrowed a resource from them. We asked that person to literally sit with the messaging team. I relied heavily on my engineering manager, who also didn't have any machine learning expertise, to become like this interface or liaison between me and the relevance team. So I think that was important. And as you know, again, being open that, okay, what does it mean? What is this constraint? Like, explain it to me in like plain English. I want to learn more, and I can help you out. So I think I did a lot of those things to help set that direction initially. So the few key metrics that we've looked at, one is the response rate. Second was messages sent. So are people sending more messages with these? Unique senders. So another thing that's interesting is, like, if I send a message to you, does that bring you back? Right? Because that's the goal. Like, that's why we are building this, so that people are actually talking to each other. So we've actually noticed that even though if I use a smart reply, it's likely that I'll get in more people who may or may not use smart reply, but the conversation will keep going on. So we also looked at like conversation depth. Does that increase with this product? So the biggest challenge here was like the legal landscape, the legal and privacy landscape that I was talking about. Because, you know, like initially when we were discussing this, we were like, oh, we need those raw messages, you know, like to be able to build models, to be able to debug things. But obviously we didn't want to do that. So what is, you know, like something that where we respect users' privacy, we have something that engineers can work with, and legally everything is, you know, like in line. We won't get LinkedIn in trouble. So I think that was the biggest hurdle for me. So these are like different orgs within LinkedIn, like product, design, engineering. But product and design, they roll up to our head of product. So that gives some level of synergy. Obviously, you know, like designers, they are designing the entire experience. They are conducting user testing. They're figuring that out. But I think way I see it, at the end of the day, me as a product manager, I am responsible for end-to-end user experience. And that it's not necessarily like the design or the UI of this, but the entire experience. Like, are we serving thanks dad? You know, like, are we, is this legally compliant? Is this, you know, like, are they looking at canned responses? So I will ensure that my voice is heard, you know, like to designers, because I'm owning the entire end-to-end experience.
So you were mentioning that some of the metrics that you focus on, like your North Stars, are the number of conversations. Are you also looking at quality of conversations? Are they meaningful conversations? are those things that you're looking to like drive your product in the future?
So to be completely honest, we don't have like a great metric around quality conversations because it's a very hard metric to judge, and also like it's not something that we could like as humans evaluate because these are private messages. So right now our focus is more around getting more people to talk to each other. I think way we see this problem is like it's a pendulum where like right now we want more people to talk to each other, and once we see that there is like a lot of activity that's happening, we need to ensure like more quality, we'll like dial it back a little bit. So I think it's focus like at a particular time.
Yeah, you talk about to build a vision of the products and better, create a user experience and work together with the other team, engineer and web designer. Could you share a little bit about how help you? What is steps or what is the thinking process to build a vision and how the vision of the product to align with the strategy of the whole company?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So as I mentioned, like for us right now, there is a lot of focus on building an active community. So like that, like any product that I'm thinking or other product managers are thinking, like we want to align ourselves to doing that what can we do to make LinkedIn a place where people are coming on a regular basis, it becomes a habit. So that guides that vision and thinking. Second is, how effectively I'm telling a story. I think it's, like literally putting myself in user shoes and saying that once we have this live, this is how it's going to impact a particular user's life. Like this is what we are aiming towards or striving towards. And then it's a combination of, using data, using user stories, using what other products are doing. It's a combination of that, and then that you help set the vision for a team. Done?